No More Room. In Hell 2 is an 8-player co-op zombie survival game that launched its full 1.0 version today. And unlike most zombie games, it does not start with a mysterious bite, or a lab accident, or a government experiment gone wrong. It starts with a denied budget request. In 2025, a CDC virologist named Dr. David Mead discovered something in a blood sample that should not have existed: a virus. Ancient, prehistoric, something that predated modern human civilization entirely and had no business being in a 2025 blood sample at all. He named it NPVA26. His team coded it 732-ZH. The people who would eventually live through what it became called it something simpler: Koulon. Dr. Mead immediately recognized what he was looking at was significant enough to require serious research funding. He sent a letter to the CDC's senior deputy director requesting the budget to study it properly. The request was denied. 3 years later, the world ended. This is the full story of No More Room in Hell 2. What the Kulon virus actually is, where it came from, how it turned the world into what the game drops you into, what HERA is and why you are working for them, and what makes this franchise's take on the zombie apocalypse genuinely different from every other zombie game you have played. If you have never played No More Room in Hell 2 or the original game, you are in exactly the right place. Everything gets explained as we go. Let's get into it. Start with the virus because everything in this story traces back to it. NPV26, the neurotropic Pleistocene virus, is a prehistoric pathogen, ancient in a way that most people do not fully process when they first hear it. Not old the way last year's old. Not old the way medieval Europe is old. Pleistocene, old. From the geological epoch that ended roughly 11,700 years ago. A virus that existed before the last ice age ended, before agriculture existed, before the first human settlements were built. Something dormant in the geological record for longer than human civilization has existed. And in 2025, it was present in blood samples across the country. Not in one location, not in one specific population, everywhere. A universal dispersion regardless of region with no obvious pattern explaining how it had spread so widely before anyone noticed it existed. The CDC's denied funding request is the detail that defines everything that follows. A prehistoric virus with near universal dispersion, spreading in a pattern consistent with airborne transmission, identified by a scientist who immediately recognized it as requiring urgent research, and the institutional response was a budget denial, not a classified emergency response, not an accelerated research program, a denied funding request, and the virus kept spreading. In 2026, it mutated. The first mutation did not produce zombies. It produced something that in isolation might have been manageable with a sufficiently coordinated medical response: encephalitis lethargica, a condition that causes progressive neurological failure, eventually inducing a coma-like state in infected individuals. Patients lose consciousness. Their bodies continue functioning biologically, but the person inside is effectively gone. The outbreak of this mutation put large portions of the population into comas simultaneously. Hospitals overwhelmed. Medical systems already strained by a virus, spreading faster than anyone understood, now dealing with mass neurological failure across the population. Emergency services collapsing under something that had no treatment and no precedent in modern medical experience. The world was not functioning well when the second mutation arrived. In 2028, the virus mutated again. This time it killed, and then it reanimated. The people who had been infected, the ones in comas, the ones who had been sick and recovered and been infected again, died from the new mutation. And their bodies got back up, not slowly, not as shambling, barely mobile threats that an organized military response could manage, as runners. And here's the detail about the reanimated strain that makes no more room. In Hell 2's infection mechanic, genuinely disturbing rather than just a gameplay challenge. The virus that spreads from a reanimated body is not the same virus that killed it. The strain underwent a gestation period inside the dead host. That gestation made it stronger, more potent, faster acting. Someone infected by a runner does not have the days or weeks that the original airborne strain took to progress through its stages. They have minutes. The zombie apocalypse in No More Room. In Hell 2 does not spread slowly. It spreads at the speed of a bite. Now, look at where the virus actually came from because this is the detail that connects the whole story. The Koulon virus originated at a dig site, a prehistoric virus accessed through archaeological or geological excavation. Human activity going deep enough into the geological record to reach something that had been dormant there for thousands of years and accidentally bringing it to the surface. The confirmed lore does not specify the exact location or mechanism, but what it confirms is that the virus was prehistoric, dormant, accessed through excavation, and then spread initially in a pattern similar to a common cold before its more devastating mutations revealed what it actually was. If that premise sounds familiar, it might be because we covered something very similar recently. Real scientists in 2023 revived a virus from Siberian permafrost that had been dormant for 48,500 years. Real researchers have been warning about prehistoric pathogens being accessed through geological activity for years. No More Room. In Hell 2 is not describing a science fiction scenario. It is describing the specific scientific concern that real virologists consider one of the genuine risks of increased drilling and excavation into deep geological layers. The CDC found Koulon in blood samples in 2025 in the game's timeline. Real scientists found a 48,000-year-old virus in permafrost in 2023 in reality. The gap between fiction and fact is smaller than most people playing this game today realize. By the time the game begins, the world has already lost. Not in the process of losing, not fighting to contain something that might still be manageable. Already lost. The infection spread too fast, the reanimated strain too potent, the institutional response too slow and too underfunded and too dependent on systems that the first mutation had already overwhelmed before the second one arrived. What remains of organized human response operates through an organization called HERA. HERA replaced FEMA as the primary disaster response organization. The lore is deliberately ambiguous about whether HERA represents a reformed FEMA or something built entirely from scratch after FEMA's collapse. What matters is that here is the institutional framework through which organized human survival is being attempted in a world where most institutions no longer exist, and you work for HERA as a responder, not as a survivor who stumbled into the fight, not as a soldier fighting a conventional war, as someone deployed deliberately into infected zones with specific objectives aimed at keeping whatever remains of civilization functional enough to matter. Each map is not just a location to survive through, it is a mission, a chapter of the ongoing story of what happened to the northeast coast of the United States after the outbreak. Lewiston, an urban map showing what happened to a city. Power plant in rural Pennsylvania showing what happened to infrastructure. Pottsville, a suburban town showing what happened to the places in between. The franchise tells its story through environments rather than cutscenes. Understanding what you are walking through matters as much as surviving it, and surviving it is genuinely difficult. The infection mechanic is where the lore and the gameplay meet in a way worth understanding before you go in. When a zombie grabs you, there's a chance it infects you with Kulon. That chance increases as your health decreases. A failed grapple or being grabbed without stamina increases it further. Children's zombies can bite and infect. Shamblers, the slower moving, older reanimated bodies that have been dead longer and move with less coordination than the faster runners, can transmit through prolonged proximity just by being near them long enough. The virus is present in the environment in ways that make every encounter a genuine biological risk rather than just a health bar problem. If you are infected, you have options, but none of them are comfortable. Phalanx pills delay the infection's progression. They do not cure it, they buy time. Gene therapy, an EpiPen-like item developed just weeks before the zombie mutation occurred, and therefore existing in limited supply, is the only actual cure. It grants immunity for the remainder of the match. The alternative is a gun and the willingness to use it on yourself. No more room. In Hell 2 does not let you fight through an infection the way most games let you fight through damage. The infection has a timer. When the timer runs out, you die and reanimate as a runner, which means you become the thing you were fighting, which means your teammates have to deal with you the same way they deal with everything else out there. The franchise title is a quote from George Romero: "When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth." The infection mechanic is the game making that idea personal rather than abstract. The 1.0 launch today brings the definitive version of everything that has been building across nearly 2 years of early access. 8-player co-op, a solo mode without permadeath for players who want to experience the story without permanent consequence, a guided tutorial, weekly missions, a new map called Raven Rock, and the game arriving on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series for the first time with full crossplay across all platforms. No More Room in Hell 2 is not a power fantasy. There's no sprinting through swarms. Resources are scarce. Every encounter risks infection or permanent character death. A responder who dies is gone. Their progress gone with them. The permadeath system means every decision carries real consequence in a way that most co-op games carefully avoid. It is also the most honest zombie game about what a zombie apocalypse would actually feel like. Not the action movie version, not the power fantasy version. The version where resources run out, where the person next to you can become the biggest threat in the room, where the institutional failure that allowed the outbreak to happen in the first place is baked into the game's own origin story. A funding request denied. 3 years of mutation. A world that ended not because the virus was unstoppable, but because the people who could have stopped it decided it was not worth the budget to try. That is the full story of No More Room. In Hell 2, a prehistoric virus discovered by a scientist whose funding request was denied. 3 years of mutation that turned a dormant, ancient pathogen into something that killed and reanimated the population, faster than any institutional response could address. A world already lost before most people understood what was happening. And an organization called HERA sending responders into the ruins of that world to do what they can with what little is left. The franchise has been asking the same question since the original game launched as a free source mod in 2011. What do you do when there is genuinely no way out? Subscribe so you do not miss the lore. Deep dives coming for this series. Because the virus origin, the HERA organization, the connection between NMRIH1 and NMIH2, and what Iceland being the only zombie-free location in the world actually means for the story all deserve their own dedicated videos. And drop a comment. The CDC denied the funding request to research Kulon in 2025. If that request had been approved, the zombie apocalypse in this game might never have happened. I find that detail genuinely haunting in a way that most zombie origin stories do not manage. Tell me what you think of the game so far